sell head-down rifles at Hyatt Guns, and they're going to be doing some fun things with the head-down rifles.
All right, it is right at 11:30, so let me jump back into these slides. So we have our friends, the closed captions. My name is Elisa Wern, and I am the lead occupational therapist for a school system in Florida. And I also have a private practice. The contact information is on the screen. The link to the slides is also here, as well as to the note page. I saw you guys had already jumped in and started putting information into the notes page. And really, you know, I want this to be a conversation. I'm going to share a little bit about what we've been doing, but I really want to talk with you all about what's been working for you, and how we can help support you. And we have been providing a mix in our district between teletherapy via a HIPAA platform, a HIPAA compliant platform, phone conversations with some students and family, and paper materials going home. So some students are getting a combination of all three. Some students, the family only wanted paper materials and we check in by phone. It really kind of depends on the student situation. So just to kind of first jump in, let me actually open up this. So I see you guys have gone in and you are adding your information into this document, which is great. And I'm actually gonna pull it over to my other screen so that you see the slides while I see the document. And I wanna know from you all, you know, what are some questions you guys have about providing related services in this distance learning model? I have a feeling we're gonna kind of be in this distance learning model for quite a bit. So what questions do you guys have about distance learning?
What was it?
And related services.
Virginia Tech. One could be a diploma.
Hmm.
I don't know what the other is.
Anybody have a question about related services and distance learning?
There's some in the chat.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for telling me that. I forget when I go into this mode that you can't always see the chat. So Nicole asked, how are we working with IEP minutes being written as direct therapy when we're now doing more of a coaching model? So the biggest thing is that, you know, that part of that is absolutely a state-by-state kind of district decision. We made a decision in our district not to alter the IEP, but to write something that's called a distance learning plan. There's all kinds of combinations and words to use to do that, but it's basically a supplementary plan that defines that, yes, we know the IEP has these services. This is what we're providing during distance learning. So absolutely, you know, sometimes if it's a coaching model, you know, we want to make sure that we're documenting that that's the service we're providing versus direct therapy. Barb, you're welcome to unmute and share the question spoken if you would like to. Pat, in terms of an assessment, it really depends on what you're assessing. There are a few teletherapy assessments that have been normed and are standardized to use during teletherapy for speech, OT, or PT. But it really depends on the student and what you're assessing. You know, some of those things we know by the nature of our profession, we are a very hands-on profession. And if it's something that you need to be hands-on to do, that's a lot more difficult to do distance learning setup. So, but I have done some evaluations. We have mailed materials to the student's home, and, you know, then had them mail them back. We've had, for our progress monitoring, we've had therapists that did things like the print tool via teletherapy, had the parent print out a version of it and had the parent then send us a picture of it for progress monitoring. Nancy, how do we reach students on the spectrum who are not responding? Yeah, we have a lot of that where parents are absolutely on overload, the kids are on overload, everybody's on overload. And we've had a conversation with them and said, what would best support you right now? If it is us checking with you every week and providing some strategies, we have OTs that have made visual schedules for home during this time. We've had OTs that provided some sensory choice menus during this time. And it might be that direct services, turn into that coaching and support model, and try to provide that support, because we know everybody is on overload. And we've had some parents that have said, hey, honestly, like, I just can't Zoom. I just can't, we're not using Zoom, but I just can't do video conferencing. I just can't do it. It's not working. And we say, okay, let's go to plan B. Let's look at paper materials. Let's look at some skills we can help support, and move forward.
Sorry.
Chris is asking about more ideas to provide OT services. Chris, do you want to unmute and tell me, a little bit more about what kind of OT ideas you're looking for? Are you looking for fine
What are you
motor
doing, Bose?
stuff?
Do you need me to help you?
Are you looking for gross motor stuff? You might have typed it in here, but
just anything.
Just anything.
Yeah, more ideas.
I can absolutely appreciate that being the comment. I will put some stuff in the notes document for sure that we have used. We've done a lot of kind of gathering materials in Google Drive and using that either to share with the students or the parents, and kind of think, we're really good at being creative as therapists. So thinking about what is that main skill we want to work on, and yeah, we might have to address it in a slightly different way, but can we continue to give them the support, knowing that, we're doing this in a very different way. So I can absolutely by category put some things in this in the shared document after we're done today, that I have no problem doing that.
Yeah, that'd be great just to share some of that info.
Perfect. I'm happy to do that, Chris. What about summer services? That's a great question for your district. And I hate to say that I don't have an answer, but I don't have an answer because I'm in Florida. We are providing summer services in Florida. We're basically continuing the same model we have now, where we have some direct service, some indirect support, some parent coaching, kind of depending on the student's need. We have found that way less families are wanting to engage in ESY, a lot just across the board. So I would be surprised if we wouldn't have the same thing there. Sandy's asking, what have others found to be the most effective way for the OT to work with students with significant autism? I have some thoughts, but if anybody else does, I welcome them to unmute. So we've done a lot of tackling kind of the parents or the caregivers' priority needs. So if the student with autism is unavailable for part of that session, sometimes that happens when we're in traditional brick and mortar setting too. And being able to kind of support in a way that, gives the parent some ideas of things that they can try at the same time. And sometimes that, that student with significant autism, we've had situations where the primary goal has just been to continue part of a routine that they did during therapy. So they're seeing a familiar face, we're doing some familiar activities, and sometimes that one session has turned out to be the one that student with significant autism has been the most engaged in, because it's been the one that they've been most willing to jump into, given that it's a familiar routine, familiar setting, familiar activities. Caseload is very young, so I'm doing lots of coaching. Yes, it depends on parents to be there. What do we do when parents cannot provide the support in real time? We do have some situations like that where we are there. We have asked, with the parents being young, the kids being young, that there is an adult present when we're doing teletherapy. I know that that's not always reasonable and possible given the adults, situation right now. And so sometimes we'll actually use an older sibling if that's who's available in the household, and they will engage and play with that older sibling. So sometimes we'll use, a middle school sibling of a younger child to help engage if the parents are unavailable. And then we follow up with the parents to provide some follow-up resources of what did we do during that session that you guys could carry over at home. The AAC and AT assessment, I have done a few. That is part of my role doing assistive technology. They are much more complicated to do, and most of the students that we're doing AAC assessments with are kids that we had started the process with prior to March 14th when we shut down in Florida, and that we needed to continue trials and those kinds of things for data collection. So we're continuing those. We're not starting any brand new AAC assessments. Everything kind of the pause button got hit. And some of the AT evaluations that I do that are for more high incidence disabilities, learning disabilities, I'm able to do some of that virtually because we're hooking them into tools like Co-Writer and sharing our screen and doing some student training. I'm not doing a lot of that, but I am doing some of that. Barb is asking, do states have a governing body for school therapist or related services? So no, not really. You know, the biggest governing body we have the support of is, you know, the AOTA, and sometimes they're not as supportive as we would like them to be supportive. So I would encourage you, if you're not an AOTA member, APTA or ASHA, that you are a member. They are trying to lobby, but right now the backup is, you know, trying to gather data to support why there might be increased need or different needs. Yeah, I'm happy to put resources in after. I've got 2 other presentations I'm doing today, so it'll be later this afternoon, but I will absolutely get that. And yeah, Cammie's sharing that in North Carolina, they do have a good setup, and if there's a specific website, Cammie, if you can drop that in the chat box or in the doc, that would be helpful. I do know, you know, I've used some of their resources in the past, so I'll put in what I can do. Yeah, Stephanie's sharing, she's put in some organizational resources and techniques to be able to, you know, kind of see, okay, what, yeah, do now, do next, kind of a first then scenario, absolutely. And Nancy's got some paras that are supporting that student, and just like we would do in brick and mortar school, we can consult with those paraprofessionals, we can consult with those, you know, the parents, and help support that student with autism, you know, because they may not have always been available in the school setting either. You know, if we're having problems with them engaging with us, that's possible to be that same way. Absolutely, highly recommend Kelly Suding's No Tech presentation. It's got some great ideas for home, and I will link it in the Google Doc later today. For PT, any ideas for any programs or things that are already available for teletherapy so it doesn't feel like starting from scratch? Yes. I can share, in terms of an online exercise program, some of our therapists do use GoNoodle. It's not specifically made for PTs, but, and have sourced some things on YouTube, but I can pull what our PTs are using for handouts. There is I'm gonna blank on the name of it now that I think I can remember. There are a couple of PT specific sites that we have used, and I will add those into the Google Doc for PT, because I do feel like, you know, there's no reason for everybody to start from scratch, because I mean, we're all working to try to do the same thing. So if we can work smarter and not harder, I always say it backwards, so I have to pause. Resources for developing handouts for students with significant impairments. Yeah, I'll get those stuff that our PT has used with some of their families and add it to the Google Doc. So Sandra, hopefully that helps answer that question. Which inclusion models are optimal for virtual push-in? So I do have some teachers that have joined the Google Classroom or the Seesaw account or whatever your district is using, and have supported the students from like a co-teacher kind of setup in those programs, and have been able to like assign assignments or reach out to students during their therapy session on activities that are happening in the virtual larger class settings. And that's been helpful. You know, they're not necessarily pushing into the whole class video time, but they are, you know, pushing in and helping support in the Google Classroom or the Teams account, those places that we are providing the services to them. There are programs that PTs in private practice use. There are some programs in PT that PTs in private practice use for like motor activities, for like, most of them happen to tend to be more orthopedic rehab, you know, based. They tend to be, you know, here's your shoulder activities for rotator cuff, and we can kind of borrow some activities for them. Yeah, there's a bunch of places for making visuals for resources. Smarty Symbols is one, and I can add a couple more into that chat as well. Brain Breaks is a great one that Chris is recommending for sure. And Margaret has shared that I'll move to the Google Doc as well, a resource for the state of Arizona has developed for distance learning. And there's a bunch of crowdsourced distance learning resource documents. I tend to find that they're a little light on the related services end. They tend to be a lot of great curriculum resources, but maybe less on the end of, you know, the supports that they need. Yeah, Summit does have a teletherapy with peds, and there's another teletherapy webinar that Summit is offering as well. I've done the teletherapy with pediatrics one, and it was very helpful. And there are a couple of other YouTube channels and web-based training that I will add into the Google Doc. Strategies for scheduling with teachers and parents and communication. I feel like scheduling, just like it is in brick and mortar school, was probably the biggest hurdle for us in terms of trying to, we had the technology learning curve, but trying to figure out how best to do it. We have, our district is Google based. We have some teachers and therapists that used the appointment scheduling feature in Google Calendar, and basically shared their calendar with parents and said, sign up for an appointment. We have teachers that shared a blank Google Doc with their available times, just kind of like we're filling in a Google Doc now, and they were able to put their student initials and their parent email in that Google Doc. You know, in terms of communication, we've done a lot of trying to align with whatever our schools are doing. So most of our schools are using Google Classroom, so they've used that same method to kind of communicate with teachers. We were very hesitant in the beginning to throw more information at our parents, knowing that they were getting a ton of information from schools back in March. Now our parents tend to either want kind of a weekly summary, here's what Johnny's doing in therapy, and here are some ways you can support them. And I think that one email a week is really, really helpful, because then you can email anybody who's on that team, teacher, parent, para. You know, I was doing these with our parents prior to this all happening. And I think having one email that just says, doesn't have to be 3 paragraphs long, just here's kind of what we've been working on this week in therapy. And if there's an activity or two you want to attach to that email, that way everybody has access to the information. Or if there's a strategy, hey, this week as he's writing, have him hold something at the, you know, on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th digit so that his pencil grip gets a little stronger. That's something that absolutely, you know, being able to help support them in getting the information that they need is very, very helpful. And I think, you know, from the big scheme of things, you know, I know that every district does it kind of differently, but I know that being able to get I think parents want a medium amount of communication. We have some parents that want to know everything about everything, and maybe you have to give a little more on that scenario. But for the most part, you know, they want to know, what do I need to know and what do I need to do? And I think if you can kind of help support those parents who do want to, you know, who want to support their kids at home during this time, little simple strategies that don't involve, you know, wanting to buy anything. We sent out a survey through Google Forms in the very beginning that said, tell me what you have in your house already. And I made one that was in Spanish. We have a high Hispanic population in our district, and included pictures on the Google form. And I said, tell me everything you have. And then the challenge I put forth to our therapist was, I don't want you creating an activity that involves something that's not on this page, unless it's something super household common, because I didn't want therapists to be saying to families, please go buy something else. That wasn't the message I wanted. And I think that's very important to kind of honor the family scenario, and knowing that lots of them are either, you know, front row providers, or, you know, are working from home and don't want to add another layer of things. Danielle's asking, how do we protect the student's privacy when pushing into a virtual classroom? Every classroom has it set up a little bit differently, but in Google Classroom, I know you can be added as a co-teacher in Google Classroom, and it doesn't, you don't show up. You can assign assignments specifically to the student, and no other student sees those assignments. I know that's the same in Microsoft Teams if you're using Teams. And so we have a couple of classrooms. We have a lot of middle and high that were already using Google Classroom in very limited ways before this started. And, you know, they were able to kind of provide, I guess, you know, expanded support and say to teachers, I'm going to help give some ideas to that student about how they could turn this in that may be a little different from student A or B in your class. So it depends on the platform. Danielle, if you want to put what platform the virtual classrooms you are that are using, I can put, oh, you mean Zoom classes, not Google or Microsoft. To me, you know, if you would walk into and push into a Zoom class, or a typical brick and mortar class during the regular school year, pushing into their Zoom class is no different. You're not going in and saying, and singling out that kid and saying, hey, Johnny, do this. You know, I might, you know, go and participate in what's happening in the lecture so that I can help a student complete part of the assignment. In those, you know, Zoom classes, you know, the live classes that are happening, I think that our role is no different than what we would do when we push in, is knowing a little bit about what the strategy is. Maybe your student participates in the whole group instruction in Zoom, and then drops out of that Zoom class and comes into a Zoom or a Google Meet with you, and you continue working and supporting the activity just like you would in brick and mortar school. Nancy says she's taken pictures or scanned the written activities or paperwork and sent them before each session. Yes, having that heads up, I think even for our families that don't have access to printers, it's been very nice to be able to just give them a heads up about, these are the things we are going to do. Some students will send on a scavenger hunt in the first 3 minutes of the session and say, I need you to go get these 3 things, and have them help gather the materials. Yes, I can put the list for the Spanish version in the Google Doc of what we sent out. In terms of other questions, and I know we've only got a couple minutes left, is there anything creative you're doing, or any other specific things or questions you have? Feel free to unmute, turn your microphone on. I'll keep the chat up so that you can type in the chat as well. Any other resource that would be helpful to you all? I know being a related service provider, sometimes it's a jump to kind of figure out, how do we provide, you know, what we were doing in brick and mortar in this new setting. And I think it comes back to, you know, OTs as a habit, and I know PTs and SLPs as well. We're very good at looking at a problem and trying to problem solve. And we've tried to approach distance learning in that same way. Let's look at a problem and try to problem solve. Any other questions? Yep. Claire's saying in the chat she's used boom cards. How are therapists communicating between related service? Nancy, do you mean like between an SLP and an OT? Okay. So the ones that are at the same schools and are providing the service just like they were before, most of them have one like 20-minute session a week where they're jumping on a video call with their providers. It was a little tough to find that time, but it's been super important, especially in the places where, you know, we've we've seen lots of kids in the same classroom. Being able to provide that consult time has been very helpful. So I'm going to stop there. I will go back through the chat. I'm going to save it now, and I'm going to go back through the chat and dump in resources into the Google Doc. Anybody have any other questions? Yep, and I've seen that North Carolina YouTube channel posted somewhere, I think on Twitter. And I'll take all the stuff that's in the chat and drop it in the Google Doc later today. Any other questions? You have my slides, you have my contact information. If there's something that I didn't go into depth enough about today, if there's something else that you would want to ask, you can always reach out to me on Twitter or by email. You're welcome to do that. And I'm happy that so many of you came to kind of hear and talk and share ideas about how to do this, because I think we're all kind of trying to figure it out as we go. So I am going to